Welcome. Yesterday, May 19th, was the 76th anniversary of the birth of Malcolm X, one of the pivotal figures in this nation's history. This edition will air some footage about Malcolm that we've never aired before. In the last year of his life, Malcolm made 2 trips overseas. He visited Egypt, where he met an assortment of scholars and political activists, helping him expand his understanding of global events and their relation to the racial climate back in the United States. In Cairo, he said that he was treated like a long-lost brother, accorded respect that overwhelmed him. And at the same time, Malcolm's movements were under the close surveillance of the U.S. government. It should also be noted that an attempt was made on his life in Cairo. Although it has never been established who had poisoned him, Malcolm narrowly escaped death. Also, Malcolm traveled widely in sub-Saharan Africa, where he was again warmly received while being closely watched. When Malcolm returned to the United States, he had embraced Orthodox Islam and was now armed with a global perspective of racism.
England has a very serious color problem developing because so many of our people are migrating there from the British West Indies. France, quietly as it is kept, has a very serious color problem developing because of the migration to France of our people from the French West Indies. And with these people from the French West Indies, black people going to France, others from the British West Indies going to England, coupled with the Asians who are coming from the Commonwealth territories, along with the Africans from French Equatorial West Africa, formerly into France, and the British possessions into Britain. There's a large, increasing number of dark-skinned people swelling the dark population of France and Britain, and it's giving them a great deal of cause for worry. The only difference over there and over here being that no one of black skin in France has ever tried to unite the dark-skinned people together, neither have they done so in England. So you can somewhat see what their fear is. No effort has been made to unite the Afro-American community or the American Negro community with the West Indian community, and then those 2 communities with the African community, and those communities with the Asian community. This has never been done.
Soon after his return, Malcolm was interviewed by Mike Wallace of CBS News, who closely questioned him about some of the explosive issues of that summer of 1964, especially in Harlem.
There was talk a month ago, you remember, of a group in Harlem called the Blood Brothers, who left the black Muslims when you did, and then later parted company with you, we are told, because the tactics that you espoused were too mild. What do you know of them, the Blood Brothers?
Well, I certainly wouldn't apologize for them. I think that the approach, if such a group as Blood Brothers exists...
Does it?
I say, well, I think all Negroes are blood brothers. Every Negro I know is my blood brother.
Oh, but Minister Malcolm, we're talking about a group said to number up to 400, probably more, who confess themselves to be anti-white as you are. They disbelieve in nonviolence as you do. One group among them is said to believe in violence, even in murder, almost for violence sake. Another group among them are said to believe in violence only for retribution, to strike back.
Well, if such a group as the Blood Brothers exists, it doesn't shock me. I would only be shocked at white people being shocked, because the conditions that prevail, Mike Wallace, are such that it's a miracle that such group hasn't formed a long time ago.
But do they exist, to your knowledge?
I think every Negro in Harlem is a blood brother, whether he admits it or not.
Are you in touch with them?
All of my preaching is done to Negroes in general. I don't try and reach any special group. I try and reach all. And my gospel to them is black nationalism, political, economic, and social black nationalism.
You have called for self-defense units, rifle clubs,
oh, yes,
ready to execute on the spot those who threaten Negroes.
I don't think that I said that.
Yes, you did.
No, I don't think I said that.
All right.
I have called for rifle clubs, that I think Negroes should, in areas where the police, whether it be federal, state, or city, have proven their inability or their unwillingness to defend Negroes, the lives and the property of Negroes, then it's only intelligent and it's only right that Negroes protect themselves, and I have encouraged them to buy a rifle and a shotgun, which according to the Constitution is legal.
For what purpose?
Not by a pistol or something like that, but a rifle or a shotgun, which is constitutionally legal.
For what purpose?
So that at any time, anyone makes any effort whatsoever to brutalize them or attack them or endanger them, they should have something to defend themselves. And in a country that spends, I think, $50 billion a year for defense alone, I'm shocked that there's apprehension over Negroes trying to do something to defend themselves.
Well, who will determine when the Negro is endangered?
I think that if the government is concerned, instead of being so worried about what the Negro is going to do, the government should stop dragging its feet and take the initiative necessary to eliminate the injustices that frustrate Negroes and drive them into a method of defense such as this.
You've said, Minister Malcolm, you have to expect the Negroes to rise up sooner or later.
Oh, yes.
What does that mean?
Well, just the same thing that it meant in South Vietnam and these other places where you find oppressed people. Sooner or later, they rise up against the oppressor. When the Jews were being brutalized in Poland, there came a time when they couldn't take it anymore, and they fought back. They didn't have too much to fight with, but they fought back. And I think every oppressed people, no matter how meek and humble they are, after you drive them so far, they're going to strike back.
Bye, kids.
Or paramilitary units in various Negro ghettos around the country and establish this coming summer for violent action?
No, but I think that most Afro-Americans, so-called Negroes, have reached the point of no return and are taking it upon themselves to be prepared if the necessity ever arrives where they will have to do something to defend themselves. Frustration itself has been sufficient, all that was necessary to make Negroes realize the importance of banding together. And Negroes are banding together.
Banding together in what kind of movements?
Different kinds of movements, all kinds of movements, and they remain almost invisible. They remain almost unknown, but yet they are there. When I say invisible, I mean invisible in the sense that their existence is unknown, and no matter how much you try and track them down, you can't find them. And never try and find them through the Negro leaders. The Negro leaders are famous as apologists. If you recall, one of the most famous Negro leaders in 1959 was asked by you about the black Muslim movement. And he said he knew nothing about it. And the next moment, you flashed a picture on the screen with him shaking hands with me. So if you will recall. So this is their policy. This is their attitude or their reaction. They never know what's going on in the Negro community.
And what form will the activities of these various so-called invisible movements take in Harlem this summer?
An example, Commissioner Murphy. Almost every statement that Commissioner Murphy makes would give you the impression that he's encouraging the police, rank-and-file policemen, that to take whatever method or measures necessary to hold the Negroes in check. He feeds the type of statistics to the white public to make them think that Harlem is a complete criminal area, that everyone is prone toward violence. This gives the police the impression that they can then go and brutalize the Negroes or suppress the Negroes or even frighten the Negroes. Whenever something happens, 20 police cars converge on one area. This doesn't frighten Negroes. So it means that someone is either misinforming Commissioner Murphy and making him use tactics this year that he would not use 4 years ago or that the former policeman Kennedy would not use. And this force that is so visible in the Harlem community creates a spirit of resentment in every Negro. They think they're living in a police state and they become hostile toward the policeman. They think that the policeman is there to be against them rather than to protect them. And these thoughts, these frustrations, these apprehensions automatically are sufficient to make these Negroes begin to form means and ways to protect themselves in case the police themselves get too far out of line.
And you know of the existence of these groups, clubs, organizations?
Well, when you walk through the streets of Harlem, you hear this comment and that comment, and you get the impression that everybody is ready.
They have arms?
I think Harlem has always been armed.
Do you look for violence in Harlem this summer?
Yes, I do look for violence. When you say Harlem, mind you, Harlem is New York City. Queens is Harlem. Brooklyn is Harlem. The Bronx is Harlem. Westchester is Harlem.
Where does your financing come from now?
Right now, I have no financing. The only financing we have are the Muslims who are still with me.
Well, how do you support yourself,
Well,
Malcolm?
I'm unsupported.
Well, you seem to be fairly well fed
Well,
and well
fortunately, while I was among the Muslims, I never lived beyond my means, and I have learned how to live within means. And I still have the clothes that that was provided for me at that time. I'm in the house that was provided for me, although we're in a court battle. They're trying to get it back.
Within 5 months after this interview, Malcolm's house was bombed. And a week later, February 21st, 1965, Malcolm was assassinated in Manhattan's Audubon Ballroom. 3 men were convicted of the terrible crime. This reporter interviewed the only one of those 3 who admitted to the assassination. Were you offered any money to do this?
No, I wasn't offered any money for my part in this. During the trial, I did state that, but that wasn't true. I was never offered any money, no.
Were you offered any assistance if you ran into any difficulty? Were there any assurances made for the protection of your family?
Well, I felt that the Muslims at the time would assist my family if my family needed some assistance.
Based on what?
Based on the fact that I was a Muslim at the time. And if I had gotten involved in something like this based on my beliefs and principles as being a member in the community at that time, that there would be some assistance in that respect.
That didn't happen?
Very little.
Where'd you get the weapons from?
The weapons, I picked the weapons up myself from an individual who had them, you know.
Weapons?
Weapons, yes.
How many did you pick up?
The ones that was used.
You picked up the shotgun?
Yes.
Were you the principal organizer of this?
No, I wasn't the principal organizer in respect to saying, well, the brain.
Who was the brain?
In that respect like that.
Huh?
Really was a collective effort and input into it.
But you were assigned to pick up the pieces?
Well, I knew I had knowledge where I could get things like that at that time.
Where'd you get them from?
I picked them up off an individual that I knew at that particular time.
In Newark?
He had, that individual had no knowledge of what my intentions was.
Where did you get the money to pick up these weapons?
Well, I had the money at that time.
How much did it cost you?
It didn't cost that much.
Give me an idea.
A few dollars here and there, not that much at all.
50, 100, 75, 8 million? What?
No. Really less than $100. Really less than
For a shotgun and 2...
Well, this was really, I could get them. I could get them was no problem.
Tell me what weapons you did get, though. 1 shotgun. And?
The shotgun, the Luger, and the .45.
You got a Luger?
Yeah.
What weapon did you use?
I used the .45.
Where'd you learn how to use a .45?
Well, I don't know if I really was that learned at using it, but I think people on the street, you know, the average man on the street, I could use one just as well as the average guy, I guess. You know, I don't have any necessary expertise.
You had never fired one before?
Oh, I fired one.
Where?
I have gone hunting a few times.
With a .45?
Well, I've taken it with me. You know, it's not legal, but I've done it.
One doesn't normally think of hunting with a .45.
Well, you see, this is a situation where, no, you don't hunt with the .45. You carry the shotgun, the .45 under your coat, and when you get a chance to fire, you fire it every now and then. This sort of thing like this here.
All right, so you were practicing with it in the months leading up?
I have done this, not necessarily for this specific thing that I did, but I had done that.
Because one doesn't fire a 45 or practice unless they have something in mind, and it's not hunting.
Well, Gil, I can disagree with you on that because
Unless
as a kid growing up, I did a lot of things that was, didn't have any real aim and purpose in it, but I did them anyway.
I see.
This was really no thing that necessarily planned. This is out in the woods, and you couldn't fire a gun like that, let's say, in city limits. You would have to be out in the woods anyway. So when I would go hunting, I would take it with me sometime. This sort of thing like this. That's all. Nothing more or less than that.
For him protection while he was alive? Do you think that we let him down?
I think that when people claim that they love a movement or they love a person or they love a thing and they only give lip profession to that, where they really don't come out and give the kind of support that's really necessary, when they really don't have the real kind of consciousness that it takes to protect and to help that thing to grow. See, when they don't have that, then they leave like a void for other things to get in. So what I'm simply saying is that because of the very thinking of the people, the government didn't care, you see. Others didn't care. So when this thing came about, it just made it that much more easier to happen. But if the people had responded to what was being said, what was being taught at the time, like they would have, I doubt if this would have happened.
In other words, you're saying that you could see from the previous rallies toward the end of his life that only a relatively small number of people were around him who cared about him.
I think so.
Or who were willing to protect him.
I think so.
And that's what made it possible for you to move in.
I'm saying that if the consciousness of the people had been greater, if the concern of the people had been greater, then I don't think that anything like this could have taken place like it did.
In retrospect, do you think that any government agencies had any role in allowing it to happen? You must have thought about the fact that all previous rallies, police were there. Many feel that plainclothes police were there when you pulled the trigger.
Well,
what are your feelings about that?
Actually, from what I understand, there was one plainclothes police there whom everyone knows about today. That was Gene Roberts, I think his name was. Other than that, I couldn't say that that day that I actually knew that there was plainclothes officers on the set. I couldn't say that I actually knew that one way or the other. But from things that have been revealed from other investigations, I think it's a person's intelligence would automatically dictate to them that there probably was other officers on the scene at that particular time.
And still you'd go through with it?
I'm looking back at this from now. Then I wasn't thinking like that at that time.
Weren't there police outside when you entered the building? Didn't you see police?
I don't recall seeing any at that time.
If you had been casing the Audubon in the preceding weeks, you would have known, you would have seen police there, so it would naturally follow.
I understand that in the past the police was around. I don't actually, but this day I don't actually recall seeing until I came out of the ballroom that day.
But wouldn't that have been a deterrent? I mean, the last time you cased the joint, as they say, police were there. You knew that police...
If it would have been a deterrent if the officer was stationed in such a position that it could have affected the situation of entering. It would have been a deterrent if there was a search at the door. It could have been a deterrent in that respect. You know, entering the place would have been impossible under those circumstances. But none of this happened.
And so even
to
though
my knowledge, I don't remember seeing an officer. He may have been there, but I just don't recall. I don't recall that.
Because those were very tense days, brother.
It's true. It's true. It's true.
And you knew that police were around there. Whether you saw them or not, you must have known that.
Gil, I can walk into a bank if my intention is of sticking it up. I know that there's police somewhere. But if I don't know where they are, what does it mean, you see? You can go in a place and come out. And it can be a different situation when you come out. So I couldn't say any more about it than that.
What were you expecting to get out of doing this? What did you expect to get from killing Malcolm?
Gil,
Do you think you would have been made a hero?
actually, at that time, to kill Malcolm, I wasn't thinking in terms necessarily of being a hero. I was thinking really in terms of doing what I felt had to be done as a member of the Nation of Islam, FOI, accepting the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as a messenger of God. I felt that he was being slandered, castigated at that time, and I felt that in doing what I did, participating in this like I did, I felt that it was only an act of my duty at that time to participate in it. This was my feelings. Not that I was seeking any kind of heroism or anything like that, but I felt that as a member of the Fruit of Islam, Nation of Islam at that time, that for me to stand up in regards to what was taking place was the right thing to do. This was my feelings then.
But not now.
No, a lot has changed. A lot has changed. We had tried to find out when we could actually carry this out. One time, I recall we had passed Malcolm's house. His house was heavily guarded, so it was obvious that nothing could be done at that particular time. And it was very difficult to say where he would be, whether he would be here, whether he would be there. So eventually, we knew that he would be speaking at the Audubon Ballroom. And beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is a place that we could be sure that he would be. And this is how we had came to decide that we would carry this out at the Audubon Ballroom.
Why would, of all places, you pick the Audubon in full view of hundreds of his followers? Why would you pick such a place? I mean, certainly this was not a kamikaze. You were certainly planning to live through this. One would think that you were really narrowing your chances of longevity in pulling off a deal in front of his followers.
I don't know, maybe there's a lot of truth to that. But at that time, as I recall it, it was just a place, the only place that I knew of, that we could possibly be sure that he would be there. And that taking into consideration the number of people and crowd psychology, we felt that we could do this.
What do you mean, crowd psychology?
The situation of a crowd, a lot of people, something happens, confusion and things like this here.
In the previous visits to the ballroom, what was your purpose? To figure out escape routes?
To look the place over. To look the place over and to figure out a plan of action.
Tell me where you sat.
Down in the front row, basically on the left-hand side, close to the front of the stage.
You mean down around in that area?
Yeah, wherever the rows started, around down in here somewhere.
Towards the center aisle?
Towards the center aisle, right.
Now, when you got there, you all came in the same car?
Yes.
And 3 people were armed. You, another man who had a pistol, another man who had a shotgun. The 4th person had a smoke bomb?
Yes.
And the 5th person was unarmed?
Yes. Yes.
Now, there are exits on either side of the stage. This is the only one in the picture. Was there any plan for anybody to leave by that exit?
As I recall, the exit was not considered at the time. I don't know whether that was because it was locked, chained, or what. But the exit was not considered as a means of leaving. We thought to leave by going back toward the entrance.
Coming back out towards
Coming back out toward the entrance that we had came in and moving with the crowd.
So tell me exactly what happened that day when it happened.
We arrived early. We drifted in two at a time, or one at a time. But going in, not together. We got there early. I remember Leon and myself coming in early, walking down to the front and taking a seat in front on the left-hand side, close to the middle aisle.
What about this scuffle in the back where somebody had his hand in somebody's pocket or something?
Well, that was part of to distract the people in regards to, at the same time when the brother came out to start speaking, the brother would cause a distraction. And during the distraction, brother who fired the shotgun would fire the shotgun. And that's basically what we did.
So your eyes were not on the scuffle that was taken back, the diversionary scuffle, but you were watching Malcolm.
Yes.
So Malcolm walked out, and he said his greeting.
Right.
And the next thing you know, you heard the scuffle, and then the man stood up behind you with a shotgun, fired the shot.
Yes.
And then you?
Myself and the other brother, we just fired. I walked toward the stage a few steps, fired our guns in that direction, broke toward the back.
Do you remember where you hit Malcolm?
No, I don't.
How many shots? Did you empty your piece?
No, I don't think I did empty my gun. I fired off a few shots. Fired off a few.
Journalist and a former associate of Malcolm's. Welcome to Like It Is.
Glad to be here, Glenn.
Let's start with your reaction to what you've just seen and heard in the preceding segment.
Well, with the Wallace segment, I just found it fascinating to watch Wallace, who has this reputation of being this incredible interviewer, and how Brother Malcolm was handling him. I thought that Brother Malcolm did an absolutely, brilliant job of handling Wallace and not allowing Wallace to use his interviewing skills to get him to say things that he didn't want to say. From what I understand, Wallace is supposed to be very famous for being able to get people to say things they don't want to say. But I didn't see one single time that come across with Brother Malcolm.
After that, there was another interview. I don't know who the interviewer was, but with Talmadge Hayer. And I was just wondering what your response is to what
Okay, with the
was
Hayer
said.
interview, I basically, he did not reveal much that was not either known or, seriously speculated upon. He came across to me as a person definitely not sharp enough to have planned this assassination. I think he was a functionary, and I still would like to know, who the organizer was, the person who pulled it together, who developed the strategy. It's just no way I could believe from watching that Hayer would be the person, who could do this.
Right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's it.
Okay.
That's it.
Now, you were there when Malcolm's life was taken. Right. Before you give me your narrative of what happened and what you saw, tell me what your relationship was to Malcolm.
Well, Gil, I was a person who had first met Brother Malcolm I first heard Brother Malcolm speak in the summer of 1962 when I moved to Harlem. And I'll never forget, I moved in like on a Friday night, and that Saturday afternoon I was walking down Lenox Avenue, very new to Harlem, not knowing much about it, having grown up in Alabama, I had all these stereotype views of Harlem. And as I was walking down with my roommate, we saw a crowd gathering at 116th Street and Lenox Avenue, where the mosque was. And so we asked what was going on, and they said Malcolm X was going to speak. So we decided to hear him. We'd heard, very vaguely about him. Usually he was the boogeyman, who, everybody was afraid of, or at least putting down. So we wanted to hear what he had to say. And so we stood there, and I remember it was very hot. And we stood there for about 3 hours. He spoke for almost 3 hours.
What was your impression of what he had to say?
I was mesmerized. And the thing I think that impressed me the most, there were two things that he did that impressed me. One, he talked about the psychological battle that we were involved in. You know, we hear a lot about the physical battle, you know, that racism had caused. But he talked about the battle for the mind. He did a lot of talking about that and how we must be aware of this and what was happening. And then the second thing he did that for me was an eye-opener was that he said that we were not up against, you know, the Bull Connor, the George Wallace, you know, the Ku Klux Klan leader. We were up against a system. And that was really, for me, very frankly, the first time that I had heard someone explain that there was a system behind all of this. And that to get all into a complete stir, you know, about a George Wallace, if George Wallace was gone, there would be the system would say there would be someone to replace him. If you can't, you're not going to get rid of white supremacy by knocking off George Wallace or Bull Connor, or, you know, or the leader of the Klan, because there was a whole system that we were involved in a struggle against. And that, to me, made things much clearer as to what we were truly up against, rather than this idea that I think the civil rights movement too often promoted, that if you get rid of a few, you know, wild people like George Wallace and everything is going to be cool. You know, he opened my eyes to that day.
What did you go on to be within, you know, your relationship with
Okay,
him?
from that time on, when I heard him speak that first time, I became a serious Malcolm X supporter. But I was not going to become a Muslim, which means then that I could only see him from a distance. Then in early January, and I think it was early January 1964, a friend of mine asked me did I want to be a part of a new black nationalist organization that was going to be formed. And I said yes. So she was very mysterious. She said, well, I'm going to call you on Saturday morning around 8 o'clock, and I'll tell you where to come. Don't ask me no questions, just come. So Saturday morning, the call came. I was ready. I went out of the house. I went over to the location that she had told me to be there. I walked into this room, and I saw a couple of people I recognized: Dr. John Henry Clark, John Oliver Killens, the novelist, and a couple of other people that I recognized. And I met them. We were sitting around talking. Nobody's, you know, passing along any information. And then I looked up, and Brother Malcolm walked in.
Okay.
Now that was my first indication that he was going to be a part of this.
Okay, let's take a break and we'll be back with more. Stay with us, please.
Meeting, we began to organize what became the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And I ended up being the editor of the organization's newsletter, The Blacklash, mainly because no one else volunteered to do it. I had no journalistic experience at the time, but I became the editor of The Blacklash. And for the next 14 months, from that time until February 21st, 1965, I was a part of the OAAU and putting out our little newsletter, The Blacklash.
What would you say his influence was on you and your development?
He had a tremendous influence on me. He gave me my worldview. At the time I met Brother Malcolm, I had no worldview. You know, I had been growing up in Alabama, you know, and I knew about, you know, racism and white supremacy and those kinds of things, but I had no worldview. Brother Malcolm introduced me to the international, made me develop an international perspective. As a Pan-Africanist, I became a Pan-Africanist because of him. He made me see that we were involved in a system. He was a teacher. He literally taught myself and people like myself how to perceive the world in which we lived. And that's very, very important, because then you can develop a means of operating if you can see clearly the world that you live in. And that's what he did for myself and others.
Can you describe his persona? What kind of a person was he off of the speaker's stand?
Well, Gil, I was fortunate enough to have had opportunity to be with him in small settings. And when you see him, I mean, he would laugh and he would joke, you know, and he was very courteous, and just he was a type person that you would never know if you did not know who he was, that this is one of the, you know, the political and intellectual giants of the 20th century that you're dealing with here. At the time, I think I was aware of that, but it did not, you didn't have time to think about it a lot, because, you know, you were busy, you know, involved with him in different things and working with him. But he was a person who could communicate. He was a communicator. I mean, they talk about a great communicator. Brother Malcolm was a great communicator. And one of the things that he was able to do as a leader was to attract people from many different, you know, areas and make them transcend their own narrow interests and become a part of the movement. And his movement was not only national, but it was also international.
What were the forces, in your view, that wanted Malcolm dead?
There's no doubt, as we saw from that segment that you showed, that there were major members of the Nation of Islam who wanted him dead. There's also no doubt that the United States government wanted him dead. Now, people say, why do you say that? You know, Gil, whenever there's an investigation of a murder, the first thing they want to try to find out is who benefited. And if you look at it, the Nation of Islam did not benefit. They may have thought they were going to, but they did not benefit from the assassination of Malcolm X. In fact, it destroyed that organization for all practical purposes. They have never been the same since then.
What would the U.S. government have to gain?
The United States government was very afraid that Brother Malcolm, on an international level, he was planning on taking the U.S. before the World Court for violating the human rights of African American people. He was advocating a linking up of people of African descent in the Caribbean, Africa, in Europe, South America, and in the United States. All of this was at the beginning, but the fact that he was doing this, and especially in the context of the times, we're talking about the 1960s, the early 1960s, which was the height of the so-called Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. And they were involved in a tremendous propaganda struggle with each other. So the fact that Brother Malcolm was taking the movement that was happening in this country and putting it on an international level was the same that England had to deal with, you know, when colonialism was put on an international level, or France. So for the United States had always been able to kind of keep the racism against black people in this country within the confines of the United States. You know, nobody else could say anything about it. Brother Malcolm said, no, this is a part of the whole movement that's happening worldwide where people of color are trying to throw off the control of people of European descent. And he was connecting us to that international movement. That was his goal. The OAAU had a foreign policy that was designed to connect the movement in this country to the international movement against European domination around the world.
All right, on that note, let's take still another break. We'll be back with more with Mr. Peter Bailey. Did Malcolm ever express to you the certainty of his demise?
He never expressed the certainty to me personally. I heard him speak, and when he talked about that possibility, and of course we were aware of that possibility, but I, for one, don't accept the concept that Sunday he knew that was going to be, the day that he was going to be assassinated. And the reason I don't, Gil, is that when he came into the Audubon that day, I was already there, and he asked me to come backstage. And when I went backstage and was speaking to him, I remembered very clearly, I showed him a column from the New York Times about the formation of the Deacons for Defense and Justice. And he said, that's good, when I showed him that. And we were talking about the Blacklash, and he said that he was going to go to Mississippi that week at the invitation of SNCC. And then when he came back, he was going to spend the next 6 months building up the OAAU. See, as you can imagine, it was difficult to get people to do anything when he wasn't around, and he had been traveling a lot during that last year.
Right.
So now here he was making plans for 6 months. He also said to me that he was going to make the Blacklash into a tabloid-sized newspaper. So with him making plans like that, I don't think that he was, that he had this kind of premonition that February 21st, 1965 was going to be the day of the assassination. But of course he was aware of that possibility.
You were there.
And we made us aware of it.
All right, you were there before his arrival.
Yes.
What happened when he arrived? Just give us a brief narrative of
Well, I can remember I was in the, when you come into the Audubon, there's like a little room up in the front. And I was in that area when he came in.
Yeah.
And he spoke. And that's when he said to me, Brother Peter, when you get a chance, come backstage.
Right.
So I went backstage. And when I was backstage, Gil, I must say that was the first time that I remember seeing him where he looked a little harried. Not fearful, not afraid, but just harried. And it took me a while, after the assassination to begin to wonder why. And I said to myself, now, the previous Sunday, his home had been firebombed. And his children had been under attack with that firebombing. Now, I don't care how devoted you are or how strong you are. when your children come under attack, it has to give you pause, and ask yourself, do you have the right to do this, to your children? And I think that was the reason why he looked a little bit harried that day.
So
but he still had the fire, he still had the determination, he was making plans, he was responding. So this whole idea that he was in some kind of, real deep funk, I didn't see it.
So you stayed in this ante-room, which was off the stage.
It was off the stage. Now, I wasn't back there when the shooting actually started.
Where did
because
you go?
He sent me back up front. He asked which one of us recognized Reverend Galamison, and I said that I did.
To come.
He was supposed to come in and make an appeal for clothing for his children, clothing for his children because they had been burned up in the firebombing. So I said I recognized him. So he sent me out front. He said when he comes in, bring him backstage. So when I heard, I was sitting there, looking at the steps where you come up, and I heard Brother Malcolm say, "Assalamu alaikum," and the next thing I heard was shooting.
What'd you do?
And I jumped up and I ran into the main ballroom, through the doors into the main ballroom, and you could hear people screaming and yelling and running toward the door, and I was knocked to the floor, and I lay there until everybody ran by. Then I jumped up and I ran down and I jumped up on the stage, and when I jumped up on the stage, Mary Koshiyama had him cradled in her arms, and I could see holes. They'd open his shirt, and I could see all these holes, in his chest. And I remember thinking, he's going to die. He's going to die.
Oh, he was still breathing.
He was still breathing. He was gasping. I could actually see him gasping for breath. And but I think by the time the brothers got back from the with the roller. I can't remember what you call that thing from the hospital.
The gurney, yes.
Gurney. Yeah. He was no longer doing that. I think maybe he had died by that time. I'm not sure.
Peter Bailey, thank you. One more segment coming up right after this.
People. And I happen to view this individual today in a different light to what I had viewed him before. In regards to the people who say that they love Malcolm, and I've heard the same thing with Dr. King and other great leaders, I think that the proof of that love really lies in the fact whether or not they're still upholding those principles that the man lived for, that he did give to the people. Whether or not they are making that a part of their lives, I think that's the test of their love. I can't change that what has been done. I can only say that I am deeply sorry for my participation in this. And I know there'll be people who can never forgive me. But I pray, and in my prayers, and I pray 5 times a day, and I ask Almighty God, Allah, to forgive me. And if He forgives me, then this is the only time that I really can feel that I am forgiven. Because on that day of Yama Kiyama, which means the day of judgment, I have to answer for what I did. If I could change what I ever did, I would change. But we all know that I can't. So I'm hurt too. I'm deeply hurt too. And I feel deeply remorse in my participation in this. But I can't change anything.
Has it caused you personal anguish?
Sure it has. When you believe in something and you stand up for it, and all these years you feel that your participation is based on right action according to the way that you believe, and then you find that, hey, something else has gotten in there somehow, and that what you thought was not necessarily what was really happening, you see. So sure, I'm hurt. I sat in prison for a long time feeling that Malcolm was actually a man that was not a true leader of our people, that Malcolm was actually a man that was a hypocrite. When I come to realize that that was not true, then I've got to be hurt. Got to be hurt. I can only say this. In life, we do many things wrong. Sometimes it's not what you do, it's who you do it to. There's guys in prison for murders, rapes, robberies. There's some guys in prison for doing nothing. I know them personally myself. But I can't change that. I can't change that. You see.
What you've done is terrible because you took his life. What bothers me, I guess, is that I was not there to stop you. That's what bothers me.
Well, Gil, I guess I can understand your feelings.
I was so stupid, equally stupid, that I never even put myself in a position to offer him any help. And if more people had, it would have never entered your mind to make such an attempt.
I agree with that 100%.
And I guess all of those feelings come together. That's what bothers me so. So you're not the focus of my anger. You're part of it, though.
Well, you understand that.
Yeah, I think I do. And I feel sorry for you and me, because we will have to live out the rest of our lives with our collective burden.
That's true.
For transcripts and